Hey guys, tonight we are going on a business trip. But pack light because where we are going, you can't take it with you in. Unless, of course, you are our client. We are traveling back about 3,500 years to the banks of the Nile, to the mysterious, sacred, and frankly quite smelly world of ancient Egypt. But you aren't a pharaoh, and you aren't a tomb raider. You have a much more important job. You are a Wedi and specifically, you are the junior guy who gets the tedious jobs. Tonight, we are going to perform the ultimate act of preservation. We aren't just wrapping a body, we are engineering a vehicle for immortality. And our mission tonight is oddly specific. We need to wrap the left big toe of a high priest. Trust me, if you mess up this toe, his soul is going to trip on the way to the afterlife. And nobody wants to be haunted by a clumsy ghost, so, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop a comment below and let me know. What city are you in right now, and what time is it there? And if you have ever tried to wrap a present and it ended up looking like a ball of tape, leave a mummy emoji so I know I'm amongst friends. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are standing at the entrance of a building that locals call the Perna-Fair, or the House of Beauty. It's a nice name for a place that is essentially a combination of a morgue, a butcher shop, and a temple. The sun is just rising over the eastern desert, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and gold. It's going to be a hot day, probably 100 degrees by noon. But inside the Perna-Fair, it is cool, dim, and smells ... complicated. Take a deep breath. Can you smell it? It's not the smell of death, that's bad for business. It's a thick, heavy perfume of cedar oil, myrrh, beeswax, and the sharp, salty tang of natron, which is basically baking soda on steroids. It smells like a pine forest that fell into a salt mine. You step inside, the floor is made of packed earth covered in sawdust to soak up the ... fluids. You adjust your linen kilt, you are shirtless, your skin bronzed by the sun, and your head is shaved smooth. Hair is just a trap for lice and corpse dust, so you keep it clean. Lying on a slanted stone table in the center of the room is your project for the next 70 days. Let's call him Pacer. Pacer was a wealthy man, maybe a scribe or a priest in life. He enjoyed beer, honey cakes, and ordering people around. Now, he is silent, pale, and waiting for you to turn him into a god. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact, the 70-day rule. Herodotus, the Greek historian who visited Egypt and who, let's be honest, loved to exaggerate, told us that the mummification process took exactly 70 days. This wasn't a random number, it was astronomical. It aligned with the period of time the star, Sirius Sothis, disappeared from the sky before rising again. Your job isn't just preservation, it's a reenactment of a stellar cycle. You are literally syncing this man's body with the stars. You walk over to the table. Pacer looks peaceful, but he also looks ... full. He still has all his insides. That's a problem. If you leave the soft bits inside, they will rot. And Pacer will explode before he reaches the Hall of Judgment. You look at the senior embalmer, a man named Hori who wears a jackal mask representing Anubis. It must be incredibly hot and hard to see in there, but he never complains. He nods at you and points to a tool on the tray. It's a long, slender bronze rod with a small hook at the end. You know what this is for. This leads to a niche. Slightly cringy detail. The brain extraction. Contrary to popular belief, Egyptians didn't think the brain was important. They thought it was just cranial stuffing that produced mucus snot. They believed you thought with your heart. So, the brain has to go. You pick up the hook, your hand is trembling slightly. You have to insert this hook up Pacer's left nostril, break through the thin ethmoid bone crack, and then whisk the brain into a liquid slurry so it can drain out. But here is the catch. You cannot break the nose. If you break the nose, Pacer will arrive in the afterlife with a smashed face. And he will be very angry with you for eternity. Academia is actually still debating this specific technique. Some modern CT scans of mummies show that not all of them had their brains removed. Some were left in to dry out naturally. Others show the brain was removed through the base of the skull, the foramen magnum, But for a high-status client like Pacer, you are doing the nose job. You take a breath, you steady your hand, you insert the hook, you are about to perform the most delicate act of destruction in human history. And you haven't even had your morning beer yet. You are standing over Pacer, your hand frozen midair. The bronze hook is inserted about 3 inches up his left nostril. You can feel the resistance of the ethmoid bone, the paper-thin barrier that separates the nasal cavity from the brain case. Hori, the senior embalmer in the jackal mask, grunts impatiently. It sounds muffled behind the mask. Something like, "Do it, boy." He isn't getting any fresher. You take a deep breath, steady your wrist, and push ... crack ... It's a small sound, like stepping on a dry twig, but in the quiet of the House of Beauty, it sounds like a gunshot. You have breached the citadel. You are now inside the skull. Now comes the part that they don't show you in the Hollywood movies. The movies make it look like you just pull the brain out in one piece, like plucking a pickle from a jar. If only it were that clean. The brain is soft, fatty tissue. It doesn't want to come out. You have to ... whisk. You rotate the bronze hook vigorously inside the cranium. You are essentially making a forbidden smoothie inside Pacer's head. You have to be aggressive enough to liquefy the tissue, but gentle enough not to puncture the skull or ruin the face. If you slip and poke through the eye socket, Pacer will wake up in the field of reeds looking like he lost a bar fight. Once you are sure the consistency is right, you signal to the assistants. They help you flip Pacer over onto his stomach. Gravity does the rest. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact that still baffles modern neuroscientists: the brainless afterlife. You watch the pinkish-gray slurry drain out of Pacer's nose and into a limestone bowl on the floor. It is a messy, undignified process. And here's the kicker. You don't save it. For the heart, the liver, the lungs, and the intestines, you have beautiful, carved alabaster jars protected by gods. But for the brain, you treat it like garbage. The ancient Egyptians believed the heart was the seat of intelligence, emotion, and memory. The brain. They thought it was a radiator. Its only job was to pump mucus to cool the blood. In their eyes. You are currently removing Pacer's air conditioning unit. You toss the contents of the bowl into the river or bury it in the sand. Outside, Pacer won't need it. He's going to do all his thinking with his heart. But now, you have a new problem: an empty head. If you leave the skull hollow, it might collapse over time, or worse, become a breeding ground for mold. You have to sterilize it. You pick up a jar of palm wine mixed with roasted spices. You pour it into the nose. You swish it around to rinse out the last of the tissue. Then, you grab a ladle of molten resin. It's hot pine pitch and beeswax heated to a liquid state. You pour it into the skull. You have to tilt the head quickly, coating the inside of the bone. As the resin cools, it hardens into a black, glass-like shell. You are essentially lining Pacer's head with a waterproof sealant. This leads to a niche. Fascinating detail: the resin line in CT scans. Modern archaeologists love this step. When they put mummies into CT scanners today, they often see a flat line of solidified resin at the back of the skull. By looking at the angle of this line, they can tell exactly how the body was positioned when the embalmer poured the hot pitch. It's like a frozen spirit level from 3,000 years ago. It tells us if you, the embalmer, were doing your job, on a flat table or a tilted one. But not every brain came out this way. This brings us to an academic controversy: the chemical dissolution theory. Some historians argue that the hook method was only for the most expensive mummies, for the middle-class clients. They suggest a more brutal, chemical approach. They claim embalmers would inject a caustic fluid, perhaps cedar oil or strong vinegar, into the skull and the stomach. Plug the holes and let the body sit for a few days. The chemicals would dissolve the organs into liquid, which could then just be drained out like pulling the plug in a bathtub. Was this true, or is it a mistranslation of Herodotus? You look at the bronze hook in your hand. It's bent slightly from the effort. You are glad you did it the hard way. It feels more ... respectful. You wipe Pacer's face. You reshape his nose, pinching the nostrils back into a dignified shape before the skin dries. You shove 2 peppercorns or maybe small balls of linen into his nostrils to keep them from collapsing. Now, he looks like he's just holding his breath. The head is done. The radiator is gone. The seal is set, but the real work is just starting. The head was the attic. Now you have to clear out the living room. You look down at Paiser's torso. It is smooth, brown, and waiting. Hori hands you a new tool. It isn't bronze, it isn't copper, it is a stone. A piece of Ethiopian obsidian, chipped into a razor-sharp blade. It is blacker than night and sharper than any metal you possess. You know what comes next. You have to cut him open, but there is a catch. In Egypt, cutting a human body is a sin. It is a violation of the sacred vessel. So, how do you perform surgery without becoming a sinner? You turn it into a play. You are about to become the ritual enemy. You grip the black stone. You locate the spot, the left flank, just below the ribs. Ready? Hori asks. You nod. You are about to commit a crime so that Paiser can be saved. And you know that as soon as you make the cut, you are going to have to run. You are gripping the obsidian blade. It is small, black, and looks like a jagged piece of glass. But do not underestimate it. This stone is sharper than the finest surgical steel scalpel you will ever see in the future. It doesn't cut tissue. It separates it on a molecular level. You locate the spot. It is always the same. The left side of the abdomen, just above the hip bone. This is the etymological incision, the sacred gateway. Hori nods. Strike. You slice. The blade glides through Paiser's skin and muscle with terrifying ease. There is no resistance. You make a cut about 4 inches long, just big enough for your hand to fit through, and then pandemonium erupts. As soon as the blood beads up, the other priests and assistants in the room suddenly turn on you. They pick up stones and clumps of dirt from the floor. They start screaming, "Violator, desecrator, you have harmed the vessel of the god." They throw the stones at you. They aren't trying to kill you, but they aren't throwing softly. Either one hits you in the shoulder, another bounces off your ribs. You drop the knife and run. You sprint out the back door of the Pernifair, panting. Acting terrified, you hide behind a pillar for a solid minute, waiting for the yelling to die down. This brings us to a niche, theatrical reality of the trade, the scapegoat ritual in ancient Egypt. To cut a human body was a crime against the gods. But you have to cut the body to save it. It's a paradox. So, they invented a loophole. You, the cutter paraschists, act as the ritual scapegoat. By cutting the body, you absorb the sin. By chasing you away and stoning you. The community punishes the sin immediately. Once the ritual is over, you wipe the dust off your kilt, walk back inside. And everyone acts like nothing happened. Hey, welcome back. Good cut. Now let's get those kidneys. It is the world's earliest form of liability insurance. You walk back to the table. The sin is gone now. It's just plumbing. You have to reach in. This is the part that tests your stomach. You push your hand through the slit in Paiser's side. It is warm inside, it is wet, and it is slippery. You are racing against biology. The moment a person dies, the bacteria in their gut, the microbiome that helped them digest their food, turns traitor. They start eating the host. They produce gas. They produce rot. You have to evict them before they consume. Paiser from the inside out. You grab the stomach first. You sever the connections and pull it out. It makes a squelching sound. Next, the intestines. Yard after yard of them. You have to be careful not to puncture them, or the smell will clear the room. Then the liver, the lungs, you pile them into 4 separate basins. They are essentially distinct entities now. But as you reach up toward the chest cavity, toward the sternum, you stop. You feel a rhythmic, muscular organ. The heart. You pull your hand back as if you touched fire. Touch the heart. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact. The seat of the soul. To us, the heart is a pump. To the Egyptians, the heart was the hard drive. It contained the person's personality, their memory, and their intelligence. Most importantly, Paiser needs his heart for the final exam. When he gets to the Hall of Mat, he has to place his heart on a scale against the feather of truth. If you throw his heart in the trash, he can't take the test. He ceases to exist. So, you leave it inside the chest cavity. You might pack it with a little linen to keep it in place, but it stays. However, Mistakes happen, or sometimes the heart is in bad shape. This leads to an academic controversy: the heart scarab replacement. Archaeologists have found many mummies where the heart is missing. In its place, there is a large stone beetla scarab placed over the chest. Camp A argues that this was just a mistake. The embalmers accidentally pulled the heart out with the lungs, realized their error, oops, and threw in a stone amulet as a backup. Sorry, Pacer, use this rock instead. Camp B argues it was intentional cheating. The heart scarab often has an inscription from the Book of the Dead, chapter 30b. Carved on the back, it says, "O my heart, ... do not stand against me as a witness." Basically, Pacer was a sinner. He knew his real heart would fail the lie detector test. So, he paid you extra to remove his snitch of a heart and replace it with a stone one that is programmed to stay silent. It's metaphysical evidence tampering. You check Pacer. His heart is still there. He was a good man, or he didn't pay for the upgrade. You wipe your hands on a rag. The body is now a hollow shell. It is empty. But the organs and the basins are still wet and dangerous. You can't just shove them back in. You have to pickle them. And you have to introduce them to their new roommates, the 4 sons of Horus. You look at the 4 beautiful jars sitting on the shelf. Time to pack the luggage, Hori says. You are standing before 4 basins filled with what looks like the aftermath of a very bad day at a butcher shop. In one, a liver slides around in its own fluids. In another, a pair of deflated lungs float like gray sponges. The stomach lies in a heap, and the intestines are coiled like a sleeping snake. To a modern pathologist, this is biological waste. To you, this is the carry-on luggage for the afterlife. Pacer. The client is going on a long trip. He will need to breathe, he will need to eat, and he will need to process that food. You can't just leave these organs inside him because they are wet, full of bacteria, and the first things to rot. If you leave them in, Pacer liquefies. So, you have to pack them in separate containers. You look at the 4 jars lined up on the shelf. They are carved from alabaster calcite. They are translucent, milky white, and cool to the touch. When you hold a lamp behind them, they glow. They are beautiful. But you have to be careful. You can't just throw any organ into any jar. This is a divine sorting game. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact: the 4 sons of Horus. Each jar has a specific head, representing a specific god tasked with protecting a specific organ. You have to memorize this, or Hori will beat you with a reed stick. Imsidi, the human head. He protects the liver. You pick up the heavy, dark red organ. You wash it in palm wine to kill the bacteria, pack it in natron salt to dry it out, wrap it in linen, and slide it into the human-headed jar. Hapi, the baboon head. He protects the lungs. These are tricky. They are full of air and float. You have to squish them down to fit. Duamutef, the jackal head. He protects the stomach. Kebasanuf, the falcon head. He protects the intestines. This is the worst job. You have to clean the fecal matter out of yards of tubing before you can pack them. It is a smelly, messy job that makes you question your career choices. But wait, you look at the empty body cavity. You notice 2 small, bean-shaped organs still clinging to the back wall of the abdomen. The kidneys. You didn't take them out. This leads to a niche, slightly amusing fact: the kidney oversight. Ancient Egyptian embalmers were excellent at removing the big stuff, but they consistently ignored the kidneys. Why? Because kidneys are embedded in a layer of fat along the spine. To an ancient eye, they just looked like lumps of suet. They didn't seem to do anything important, unlike the stomach or lungs, so they were often left inside. Archaeologists today frequently find shriveled, dried kidneys inside otherwise empty mummies. It wasn't religious doctrine, it was just anatomical indifference. A. Looks like fat. Leave it. You pour hot black resin over the wrapped organs inside the jars. It sizzles. This seals them in a waterproof coating. You place the heavy stone lids on top. Click. Packed and ready to go. But here's where things get messy. You are tired. The palm wine fumes are making you dizzy. The jars all look similar except for the heads. Did you put the liver in the baboon jar or the jackal jar? This brings us to an academic controversy, the anatomical competence debate. We assume Egyptians were master anatomists because they opened bodies, but were they? Camp A, the medical historians, argues that they knew exactly what they were doing. The Ebers Papyrus lists medical treatments for specific organs. They say any mix-ups were rare accidents. Camp B, the ritualists, argues that the embalmers were priests, not doctors. They didn't care about biology. They cared about theology. Camp B points to the fact that in many mummies, the heart left inside is actually a piece of mud, or a kidney, while the real heart was accidentally thrown in a jar with the lungs. There are jars labeled stomach that contain a spleen. The argument is, did they know the function of these organs, or were they just categorizing them by shape? Red blob goes in jar A, long tube goes in jar B. You look at the jars. You are pretty sure you got it right. Pretty sure, if not, Pacer might try to digest food with his lungs in the afterlife, which will be uncomfortable, but that's his problem, not yours now. You turn back to the body, Pacer is empty. He is a hollowed-out husk. He is floppy. If you try to wrap him now, he will just rot from the moisture in his muscles and skin. You need to dry him out. You need to turn him into human beef jerky. You signal to the assistants. They drag over heavy sacks of a white powdery substance. It looks like salt, but it isn't table salt. It is natron. This is the magic dust of Egypt. It is a natural mixture of sodium carbonate and sodium bicarbonate baking soda harvested from dry lake beds. It doesn't just dry things. It sucks the fat and moisture out of cells like a vacuum. You are about to bury Pacer in a mountain of this stuff, and he has to stay there for 40 days. You shovel a layer of natron onto the stone bed, you lay Pacer on top. Then you start shoveling more over him. You pack it into the empty chest cavity, you pack it into the skull. You pile it over his legs. Soon, Pacer is gone. There is only a white mound in the center of the room. You wipe your hands. Your skin feels dry and itchy just from touching the dust. Sleep well, you mutter. For the next month and a half, your job is easy. You just have to let chemistry do the work. But when you come back in 40 days, the man you pull out of that pile won't look like Pacer anymore. He will look like a statue made of dark leather. He will be stiff, thin, and terrifyingly fragile. You step out of the pernifaire into the blinding sun. You need a drink. You need to wash the smell of stomach acid off your hands. But as you walk to the river, you can't help but wonder, Welcome back. It has been 40 days. For the last month and a half, you have been busy doing other things. Maybe you embalmed a few commoners, a much quicker, cheaper process that mostly involves injecting cedar oil and hoping for the best. Maybe you spent your wages on beer and lentils, but in the back of your mind, you haven't forgotten about Pacer. He has been lying in the corner of the pernifaire, buried under a mountain of white powder. To an outsider, it looks like a snowdrift in the desert. But you know better. That mound is a slow-motion chemical reactor. You grab a wooden shovel. Hori, the jackal-masked master, stands over you. Dig him out, he commands, double quotes gently. If you snap a finger, you pay for it. You start to scrape away the natro. It has changed. When you shoveled it on 40 days ago, it was loose, powdery, and dry. Now, the layer closest to the body is hard, clumpy, and stained a yellowish brown. Why? Because it has absorbed Pacer specifically. It has absorbed his water and his fat. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact. The chemistry of natron. Natron isn't just table salt. It is a naturally occurring cocktail of sodium carbonate and sodium bicarbonate. When it touches body fat, a reaction occurs called saponification. Does that word sound familiar? It's the same chemical process used to make soap. Basically, the natron has turned the fat in Pacer's body into a hard, soapy substance. You are literally scrubbing the corpse from the inside out. The smell is distinct. It's acrid, ammoniac, and undeniably clean, in a very harsh, bustrial way. You reach the body, you brush the last of the salt off his face. You gasp, he has changed. Pacer was a well-fed man. He had round cheeks and a bit of a belly now. He looks like a celebrity who took a diet trend way, way too far. He is gaunt. His skin is dark, almost black, and pulled tight against his skull. His lips are retracted, showing his teeth in a permanent, mirthless grin. He has lost about 75% of his body weight. He is essentially a human-shaped piece of leather stretched over a skeleton. This leads to a massive academic controversy, the wet vs. dry debate. For over a century, Egyptologists argued about how this natron was applied. Camp A, the soakers believed the natron was mixed with water to create a brine solution, like pickling a cucumber. They pointed to the word tariku used by Herodotus, which can mean to pickle. Camp B, the packers argued for dry powder. They claimed that soaking a body in water, even salty water, for 40 days would result in a soup, not a mummy. The skin would slough off the gloving effect, and the hair would fall out. In the 1990s, two researchers, Bob Breyer and Ron Wade, actually performed a modern mummification on a donated cadaver to settle the bet. They used dry nat-ron. The result was perfect preservation. If they had used liquid, they likely would have ended up with a skeleton in a bucket of sludge. So, as you brush the dry powder off Pazer's chest, you are witnessing the victory of the dry packers. You lift Pazer out of the natron bed. He is incredibly light. You can lift him with one arm. He is stiff as a board. You carry him to a clean table. You have to be careful. He is brittle. If you bump his arm against the doorframe, it might snap off like a dry twig. You inspect the extremities, the fingers, the toes. They are shriveled, but they are there. This brings us to a niche, brilliant little trick, the thread guard. Before you buried him, you might have tied tiny pieces of linen string around each finger and toe. Why? Because as the skin shrinks and dries, the fingernails and toenails loosen. They tend to fall off and get lost in the natron pile. A pharaoh cannot rule the afterlife without fingernails. It would be embarrassing, so the string kept them attached. Now, you check them. 10 fingernails, 10 toenails, perfect. But there is a problem. You look at Pazer's face. His eyes have collapsed into the sockets. His nose is flattened. His stomach, once round with prosperities, now a concave bowl resting against his spine. He is preserved. Yes, he will last forever. But he doesn't look like Pacer. He looks like a raisin. If his soul flies down from the sky and looks at this shriveled husk, it might not recognize him. It might say, "Who is this dried-up stranger?" and fly away. That would be a disaster. You need the soul to recognize the body. You need to reinflate him. You need to perform the ancient Egyptian equivalent of Botox and fillers. But instead of silicone, you are going to use mud, sawdust, and old rags. You grab a bucket of packing material. It's a mixture of sawdust, linen scraps, and maybe some aromatic lichen from the desert. You look at the incision in his side, the one you made with the obsidian knife. 40 days ago, it is stiff and gaping. You have to reach in again. But this time, the inside is dry and scratchy. You start grabbing handfuls of the stuffing. You push it into the chest cavity. You push it down into the abdomen. You pack it tight. You are sculpting him from the inside. You push until his chest puffs out again. You push until his belly looks respectable. But what about the face? You can't stuff the face from the inside. You removed the brain. Remember. So, you have to pack the mouth. You push linen pads into his cheeks to puff them out. You might even place pads over his eyes, under the eyelids. To make them look round again, you step back. He looks better. He looks ... humanish. He's still dark and leathery. But he has volume. You pick up a jar of expensive oil, frankincense, and myrrh. You start to massage the stiff skin. You rub the oil and... This serves two purposes. First, it makes the skin supple again, so it doesn't crack when you wrap it. Second, it smells like the gods. The harsh, ammonia smell of the natron fades, replaced by the sweet, spicy scent of the temple. You are done with the preservation. The biology is halted, the chemistry is finished. Pacer is dead, dried, and stuffed. Now begins the art. You look at the pile of linen bandages in the corner. You leave Pazer's oiled, stuffed, and somewhat rejuvenated body on the table for a moment. He isn't going anywhere now. You need to visit the supply room. You need bandages, miles of them, to wrap a single mummy properly. You need roughly 375 square meters, 4,000 square feet of linen. That is enough fabric to cover a basketball court. You walk into the storage. Annex of the pernifair piles of white cloth are stacked to the ceiling. But if you look closely, you'll notice something strange. These aren't pristine bolts of fabric fresh from the weavers. Loom. They have seams. They have hemmed edges. Some of them even have laundry marks or embroidered names on the corners. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact: the recycling of the dead. The bandages used to wrap mummies were almost never new. They were old clothes. Pacer is about to be wrapped in his own bed sheets, his old tunics, and maybe even the curtains from his living room. Why? 2 reasons. First, economics. Flax takes a lot of water and labor to grow. Weaving it is time-consuming. Wasting brand new high-quality linen on a corpse that is just going to be buried in the ground was seen as well, a waste. Second, spiritual connection. The Egyptians believed that objects used in life retained a spark of the owner's essence Ka by wrapping Pacer in his own clothes he wore while praying. Eating and living you are wrapping him in a cocoon of his own identity.
It's familiar.
It's comforting. You grab a pile of tunics. They are soft. This is crucial. Old, washed linen is supple. It conforms to the body. New linen is stiff and scratchy. You don't want to chafe the king or the priest for eternity. Now begins the noisy part of the job. You sit on the floor with a few other apprentices. You take a tunic. You find a loose thread at the hem. Rip. The sound of tearing fabric fills the room. It's a sharp, rhythmic zip sound. You have to tear the clothes into specific strips. You need narrow strips about 2 fingers wide for the fingers and toes. You need medium strips a hand's width for the arms and legs. You need wide sheets the size of a shroud for the final cocoon. This leads to a niche. Bureaucratic detail, the linen markings. As you tear, you might find ink inscriptions on the fabric. Year 5 of Ramses III, or Temple of Amun. Archaeologists love these. They are like receipts. Sometimes, families would donate linen to the temple as a tax, and the temple would sell the surplus old vestments to the So, Pacer might be wearing a shirt that originally belonged to a statue of a god. That's a serious upgrade for his soul. But there is a darker side to this supply chain. This brings us to an academic controversy: the grave robber. Recycling loop. We know grave robbing was rampant in ancient Egypt. But what did they steal? Gold. Yes. But they also stole the linen. Resin-soaked linen burns really well. It was used as torches. But some historians argue that corrupt embalmers, maybe even your boss, Hoary would buy stolen linen from robbed tombs, wash it maybe, and resell it to new clients. The controversy is, how widespread was this? Was it a few bad apples, or was the entire funerary industry a giant pyramid scheme of recycled rags? You look at a strip of linen in your hand. It has a dark stain that looks suspiciously like old resin. You decide not to ask Hoary where he got this batch. You just keep tearing. The air in the room gets thick with lint dust. It tickles your nose. You sneeze, ach. You hope you didn't just sneeze on a sacred bandage. You wipe it off. You roll the strips into tight cylinders. You need them to be organized. When you are in the zone, wrapping a complex geometric pattern on the body, you can't be fumbling with tangled knots. You stack the rolls. Small, medium, large. It looks like a medical supply station, but made entirely of rags. You carry the baskets of bandages back to the embalming table. Pacer is waiting. The oil on his skin has soaked in, but you can't just wrap dry cloth around him. It will slip. It will unravel. You need glue. You need the black gold of the embalming trade. You look toward the fire pit in the corner. A large cauldron is bubbling. Black smoke is rising from it. It smells sweet, acrid, and dangerous. It is the resin. And you are about to learn why embalmers usually have no hair on their arms, because working with this stuff is a fiery hazard. You are standing in front of the cauldron, and the heat is intense. It radiates against your shins, making the sweat run down your legs. The substance inside is bubbling sluggishly, popping with thick black bursts that release plumes of acrid smoke. This is the black liquid chitin. To the uninitiated eye, it looks like road tar. To you, it is the most expensive cocktail on the planet. It is a mixture of pine resin, cedar oil, beeswax, animal fat, and depending on the budget of the deceased, maybe a little bit of bitumen imported from the Dead Sea. You dip a long ladle into the pot. The liquid creates a stringy, golden black thread as you pull it up. It smells like a forest fire in a candy shop, sweet, piney, and burnt. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact, the origin of the word mummy. Why do we call them mummies? The ancient Egyptians called them sa. But centuries later, when Persian and Arab travelers found these blackened, resin-coated bodies, they thought they were covered in bitumen, asphalt. The Persian word for bitumen wax is mumia, so mummy literally means bitumen, thing, for hundreds of years. Europeans actually ground up mummies and ate them as medicine because they thought the bitumen had healing properties. You are essentially cooking the main ingredient of a future Victorian pharmaceutical cannibalism craze. You carry a bowl of the hot resin to the table. You have to move fast as it cools. It turns from a liquid into a rock-hard glass. You dip a brush, made of palm fibers, into the black goo. You paint a thin layer onto Pazer's skin. Sizzle. The hot resin hits the dried, cold skin. It seals the pores. It creates a waterproof barrier that bacteria cannot cross. It is the ultimate sterile packaging. But there is a scientific battle raging over this pot of goo. This leads to a massive academic controversy. The bitumen debate. For decades, scientists argued, did Egyptians actually use bitumen crude oil product, or is the black color just oxidized tree resin? Campa, the resinists, argued that mass spectrometry proves most black goo is just tree sap from pistachia or conifer trees that turned black over time due to heat and aging. They claim the bitumen idea was a mistake by later historians. Camp B, the geologists, fought back. Recent studies show that in later periods, like the Ptolemaic era, they did use natural asphalt imported from the Dead Sea. It was cheaper than cedar oil. So, is Pazer getting the luxury tree sap treatment, or the cheap road tar special? Judging by the sweet smell, he paid for the tree sap. He is a high-end client. You paint his arms. You paint his chest. You are careful not to pool the resin too thick, or it will burn through the linen later. But before you start wrapping, you have to attend to the details. You look at his hands and feet, the fingernails and toenails. Remember the string you tied earlier? It kept them attached during the salt bath. But now, under the pressure of the bandages, they might snap off. A pharaoh without fingernails cannot point at his enemies in the afterlife. It's a dignity issue. You reach into a small wooden box. Inside, glittering in the torchlight, are 20 tiny objects. Gold finger stalls. This is a niche, luxury detail, the golden manicure. For the ultra-wealthy, embalmers didn't just trust the string. They capped each finger and toe with a thimble made of pure gold leaf. You carefully slide a gold cap onto Pazer's left big toe. It fits perfectly. You do the same for the fingers. Now, he looks like he has metal claws. This serves two purposes: protection. It physically holds the nail in place. Solar symbolism. Gold is the flesh of the gods. It does not tarnish. By giving him gold fingers, you are giving him the hands of a god. He can touch sacred objects in the afterlife without polluting them. You step back. Pazer is now glistening. He is black from the resin and gold. He looks less like a corpse and more like a statue, but he is sticky. Extremely sticky. If you touch him now, you will be glued to him. This is why you rub your own hands with a specific oil, perhaps castor oil, to act as a release agent. Now, the wrapping begins. You don't just grab a sheet and roll him up like a carpet. That is for peasants. You are doing the digit-by-digit wrap. Every finger, every toe, every limb must be wrapped individually first. You pick up the smallest rolls of linen, the narrow strips you tore earlier. You kneel at the foot of the table. You look at the left foot. Why the left? In ancient Egypt, the left is the side of life. You step with your left foot first. You enter the temple with your left foot. The heart is on the left. Therefore, the journey to the afterlife begins with the left foot. You take the strip of linen. You dip the end into the hot resin to make it sticky. You press it against the tip of the gold, capped left big toe. Hold still, Pazer, you whisper. You are about to perform a complex figure-8 weave around a dead man's toe. It requires the dexterity of a magician and the patience of a saint. And if you mess it up, if the bandage is too loose, it will slide off. If it's too tight, it might snap the dry toe right off the foot. And explaining to Hori why the high priest is missing. A toe is a conversation you do not want to have. You are kneeling on the hard, packed earth floor of the Pernefer. Your knees are aching, but you don't dare move. Your entire universe has shrunk down to a single point of focus, the left big toe of the high priest Pazer. It is capped in gold. It glitters in the torchlight, and it is waiting for you to make the first move. This is the most critical moment of the wrapping process. Why? Because in the world of linen bandages, there is no such thing as starting over. If you mess up the tension on the first toe, the error propagates. By the time you reach the ankle, you will have a loose, baggy mess. By the time you reach the knee, the bandage will unravel. And if the bandage unravels, the magical seal is broken, and demons can get in. You dip the end of your narrow linen strip into the pot of warm resin. It acts as your anchor. You press the sticky cloth against the sole of the foot, right at the base of the big toe. You hold it there for a count of 10, 1, 2, 3. You feel the resin cooling, gripping the dried skin like a claw. 10. It holds now. You begin the wind. You don't just circle the toe like you are bandaging a cut. That would be too easy. You have to perform a spiral figure-8. You bring the linen up over the nail, cross it underneath the pad, bring it back up over the knuckle, and loop it around the ankle. Then back down to the toe up. Cross down, anchor up, cross, down, anchor up, cross down. Anchor. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact. The left foot lead. Why start with the left big toe? Why not the right pinky? In ancient Egyptian iconography, look at any statue of a pharaoh or a god. Which foot is forward? Always the left. The left foot is the active foot. It is the foot you use to step on your enemies. It is the foot you use to enter the temple. It is the side of the heart. By securing the left big toe first, you are metaphorically engaging the engine. You are hitting the start button on Pazer's journey. You are ensuring that when he stands up in the afterlife, he leads with power. You pull the linen tight. Snap. Not the bone. Thank the gods. But the fabric. It snaps taut against the gold cap. It looks clean. It looks sharp. But you can't just wrap the toes together. This is a common rookie mistake. If you wrap all 5 toes into one big club foot, you have created a mono flipper. Pazer needs individual toes. He needs to be able to wiggle them in the field of reeds. So you have to use spacers. This leads to a niche, logistical detail. The linen pads between every single toe, you have to insert a tiny folded pad of linen. Why? Because of the resin. If you paint the toes with sticky black goo and then press them together, they will fuse. Over 1,000 years, they will become a solid block of bioplastic. The spacers keep them separate. They maintain the divine geometry of the foot. You slide a tiny pad between the big toe and the second toe. It fits perfectly. As you weave the bandage around the second toe, you find yourself muttering, "You aren't crazy. You are doing your job. You are reciting the ritual of embalming." Every body part has a specific spell. You might recite, "Your feet are the feet of Adam. You shall not stumble. You shall not fall." You have to say it while you wrap. The magic is woven into the cloth. The words are the mortar. The linen is the brick. But this brings us to a heated academic controversy, the clockwise debate. Egyptologists have spent an embarrassing amount of time analyzing the direction of mummy bandages. Kampa, the solar school, argues that bandages should always be wrapped clockwise sunwise. This mimics the path of the sun god Re across the sky. It represents life, order, and resurrection. Can't be. The Assyrian school argues that for the dead, everything is reversed. The underworld is a mirror. Therefore, bandages should be wrapped counterclockwise widdershins. When archaeologists unwrap mummies, which is destructive and rarely done now, they look for this. And guess what? They find both. Some mummies are clockwise. Some are counterclockwise. Some switch directions halfway up the leg. Was there a strict rule, or was it just, are you right-handed or left-handed? You are right-handed, you wrap clockwise. If Hori yells at you, you'll just say you are honoring RA. You finish the toes? They look like 5 little white cocoons sticking out of a gold-tipped block. Now the foot itself. You switch to a slightly wider bandage. You start the herringbone pattern. You cross the bandages over the instep in a series of V shapes, left to right to left. It creates a beautiful geometric pattern that runs up the top of the foot. This isn't just for looks. The herringbone pattern is structural. It acts like a compression sock. It holds the delicate metatarsal bones together, so the foot doesn't disintegrate if the mummy is stood upright. You reach the ankle. You tie off the linen with a complex knot. You dip your finger in the resin pot and smear a seal over the knot. It is done. The left foot is armored, but before you move to the right foot, you have to add the accessories. Pazer was a man of status. He didn't walk barefoot in life, and he won't walk barefoot in death. You pick up a pair of sandals. These aren't his old gym shoes. These are funerary sandals. They might be made of woven papyrus, or painted wood, or even thin gold sheet. You strap them onto his now bandaged feet. It looks a bit silly. Sandals over bandages, but the logic is sound. The bandages protect the body, the sandals protect the bandages. You sit back on your heels. You wipe the sweat from your forehead, careful not to get resin on your face. 1 foot down, 1 to go, then 2 hands, then 10 fingers, then the arms, then the legs. It is tedious. It is repetitive. But as you look at that perfectly wrapped left foot, you feel a surge of pride. It is a masterpiece of textile engineering. It is a sculpture made of rags and glue. And now, you have to do something sneaky. Hori, the master embalmer, has stepped out to get water. You are alone with Pazer. You reach into your pouch. You pull out a small object. It is a scarab beetle carved from green stone. It is an amulet, a magical charm. You are supposed to place these between the layers of bandages. But here is the secret. You aren't just placing them anywhere. You are building a magical circuit board. You place the scarab right over the ankle pulse point. Then you cover it quickly with the next layer of linen. Why? Because amulets are the batteries of the afterlife, and you are about to load Pazer up with enough magical voltage to jump-start a starship. You are now operating as a spiritual electrician. The body of Pazer is no longer just a corpse. It is a complex machine that needs to be wired up. The bandages are the insulation, but the amulets are the microchips. You reach into your leather satchel. It is heavy with stone, glass, and faience, a type of glazed ceramic. You have about 30 or 40 items to install. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact. The quantity of protection. We often think of mummies having maybe 1 or 2 jewels. In reality, a high-status mummy like Pazer acts as a pin cushion for amulets. King Tutankhamun had over 140 amulets wrapped in his linens. Pazer is in pharaoh, but he can afford a solid 30. Every single one serves a specific function. If you forget the Waj green column amulet, Pazer might not be able to stay fresh and green in the afterlife. If you forget the Udjat, Eye of Horus, he might lose his health. You move up the leg. You place a small Djed pillar on his shin. It looks like a tiny telephone pole with 4 crossbars. This represents the backbone of Osiris. By placing it here, you are giving Pazer stability. You are ensuring his spine remains upright for eternity. You cover it quickly with a layer of resin-soaked linen. Slap, wrap, hide. The amulet disappears. It is now a secret lump under the cloth. You move to the incision, the cut you made with the obsidian knife 40 days ago. It is sewn shut now, but it is still a weak point. It is a spiritual wound. You pick up a very specific, strange-looking amulet made of black obsidian. It looks like two fingers, the index and the middle finger, extended. This is the two fingers amulet. You place it right over the incision. Why? This leads to a niche, mystical detail. The divine touch. The two fingers represent the fingers of Anubis, or sometimes Horus, touching the dead body to heal it. It is a magical band aid. It seals the breach. It tells the gods, this hole is authorized. Do not let the demons in here. You wrap the torso. This is heavy lifting. You have to lift Pazer's stiff shoulders to pass the bandages underneath. You place a tight, the knot of Isis, made of red jasper on his chest. It looks like a looped belt. It grants him the protection of the goddess. Blood. You place a heart scarab over his heart, just in case the real heart decides to snitch. But as you place a small gold vulture on his neck, you hesitate. You look around. Ori is still outside. The other apprentices are busy mixing resin. You look at the gold vulture. It is heavy. It is solid. It is worth 3 months of your salary. If you were to accidentally drop this into your pocket and replace it with a painted piece of wood, who would know? Pazer is dead. The family will never see it again. It will be wrapped under 20 layers of linen. This brings us to a massive academic controversy. The fraudulent embalmer theory. For years, museums would X-ray mummies and find gold amulets. But when they finally CT scanned them or unwrapped them, they found painted mud, or wood covered in gold foil, or sometimes nothing at all, just a lump of linen shaped like a beetle. Campa, the cynics, argues that embalmers were running a massive scam. They showed the family the solid gold amulets. Look what we are giving him. Took the payment, and then swapped them out for fakes at the last minute. They claim the embalming industry was the used car dealership of the ancient world. Camp B, the symbolists, argues that this was fraud. It was symbolic magic. In Egypt, the image of the thing is as powerful as the thing itself. A wooden beetle painted gold is a gold beetle in the spirit world. The material doesn't matters. So, were they thieves? Or were they just practical metaphysicians? You look at the gold vulture. You feel the weight of it. You sigh. You place it on Pazer's neck. You are a professional. And besides, you are terrified of Pazer's ghost coming back to haunt you for shortchanging him on neckwear. You wrap it tight. You seal it with resin. You have resisted temptation. You are a good boy. But you aren't done. You have to wrap the arms. Here is a technical choice: crossed or straight. In the Old Kingdom, mummies had their arms at their sides. In the New Kingdom, which is where we are, roughly, royal mummies cross their arms over their chests in the Osiris pose. Pazer is not a king, but he is high status. You decide to cross his arms. It looks more dignified. It looks like he is hugging himself for eternity. You bend the stiff elbows. Creak. You have to be gentle. The tendons are like dried leather. If you force it, the arm snaps. You secure the arms with long figure-8 bandages around the shoulders. He now looks like he is in a straitjacket. You step back. He is no longer a human body. He is a white, resin-stained cocoon. He has lumps where the amulets are. He looks like a chrysalis waiting for a moth to emerge. But he is missing the final layer. The shroud. You need a massive sheet of linen to cover the whole assembly. But you don't. Just use a white sheet. You pick up a sheet that has been painted. It has a drawing of Osiris on it. You paint Pazer's name on the front in hieroglyphs. The Osiris, the priest Pazer, true of voice. You have to get the name right. If you misspell his name, The postal service of the afterlife will lose his mail. His offerings of bread and beer will go to Puser or Passer, and your client will starve. You paint the glyphs carefully with a reed brush dipped in carbon ink. You are almost done with the body. But there is one part of him that is still exposed. The face. You have wrapped the head, but you left the face open for the final touch, the mask, but not just any mask. You aren't putting a wooden smiley face on him. You are putting on the cartonnage. This is the ancient Egyptian equivalent of papier. But instead of newspaper and glue, you use linen and plaster, and it is painted to look like the perfect, idealized version of Pazer. Not the old. You step back to admire your work. Pazer is now fully encased in linen. He looks safe. He looks protected, but he also looks, well, like a lumpy white log. If you sent him to the afterlife looking like this, the gods might think he was a peasant. A high-status mummy cannot just be wrapped, he must be styled. You reach for a new basket of bandages. These are different. They are narrower, crisper, and some of them have been dyed a faint, rusty red. You are about to begin the geometric outer layer. This brings us to a mainstream historical marvel, the art of the rhomboid. If you look at mummies in museums, especially from later periods, they aren't just wrapped round and round like a cartoon character. They are wrapped in intricate, interlocking diamond patterns. You take a long strip. You start at the chest. You wind it diagonally down to the right hip, wrap it behind the back, bring it up to the left shoulder, and cross it down again. Over, under, cross, pull. You are creating a net, a cage of linen. It requires the spatial reasoning of a weaver and the precision of a mathematician. You have to keep the spacing perfectly even. If one diamond is lopsided, the whole pattern falls apart, and Pazer looks sloppy. This leads to a niche, colorful detail, the red straps. Why are you using red linen for the final bracing straps? It is a fashion statement. It represents the blood of Isis. The mythology says that Isis possessed a magical girdle or knot, the tayet, that protected her son Horus. By wrapping Pazer in red straps, you are invoking that protection. You are dressing him in the goddess. Embrace. You pull the red strap tight across his chest. It contrasts starkly with the white background. It looks striking. It looks expensive. But as you weave this endless web, your mind wanders to the sheer volume of material you are using. This brings us to an academic controversy, the industrial waste hypothesis. Where did all these specific, narrow, high-quality outer bandages come from? Camp A, the pious donation theory, argues they were specifically woven for funerals by temple workshops. Camp B, the recycling theory, argues that the geometric wrap was invented to use up scrap. Think about it. If you tear a tunic to make a wide sheet, you are left with the hems, the seams, and the weird narrow offcuts. What do you do with them? You can use them for the base layer because they are lumpy. So, you use them for decoration. Camp B suggests that the elaborate diamond pattern wasn't purely theological. It was a way for the embalmers to use up the trash linen while charging the client for premium artistic wrapping. It's the ancient equivalent of upcycling. You work your way down the legs. The pattern is mesmerizing. Cross, loop, tuck, resin. Your fingers are sticky. Your back hurts. The air in the pernefer is stiflingly hot, but you can stop. The resin dries fast. You reach the feet. You tie off the final knot at the ankles. You stand up and look at Pazer. He is no longer a lumpy log. He is a masterpiece of geometry. He looks like a futuristic sculpture made of white and red tape. He looks ready to endure 1,000,000 years. But there is one thing missing. You look at the head. You have wrapped it. Yes, it is a round, featureless knob at the top of the body. It has no eyes. It has no mouth. How can Pazer speak the magic spells if he has no mouth? How can he see the demons if he has no eyes? You need to give him a face, not his real face, that is shriveled and hidden under 20 layers of cloth. You need a better face. You signal to Hori. He walks over to a wooden crate in the corner. He lifts out an object wrapped in soft wool. He unwraps it. It glitters in the dim light. It is a face of gold, blue lapis lazuli, and obsidian eyes. It is staring right at you, the death mask. You are about to perform the crowning moment of the entire 70-day process. You are about to give Pazer his eternal identity. But be careful. If you drop this, you don't just lose your job, you lose your head. You are standing face to face with Pazer. Or rather, you are standing face to face with who Pazer wants to be for the rest of eternity. Ori hands you the object. It is surprisingly lightweight, but it feels fragile in your hands. This is the death mask. To the untrained eye, it looks like solid gold. It glitters in the torchlight, casting a warm, divine glow that lights up the dim embalming workshop. But you know the truth. Solid gold is heavy, and unless Pazer was a pharaoh, he could afford a solid gold helmet. This is cartonnage. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact, the ancient papier. Mutia, long before grade school art classes, the Egyptians mastered the art of layering. You take scraps of linen or old papyrus, soak them in plaster and glue, and mold them over a form. Once it dries, it is hard, smooth, and lightweight. Then, you cover it in a thin layer of gold leaf and paint the details with expensive pigments like Egyptian blue, made from ground glass, and ochre. It is the perfect, budget-friendly alternative to solid metal. It looks like $1 million, but it costs, well, it costs a lot of linen scraps and glue. You step up to the mummy. The head is currently a round, featureless ball of bandages. You gently lower the mask onto the face. It has to be perfectly aligned. If you put it on crooked, Pazer will spend eternity looking slightly to the left, which is annoying during the weighing of the heart ceremony. You press it down. The resin on the underside grips the bandage's squish. It holds, you look at the face. It is serene. It has wide, kohl-rimmed eyes made of obsidian and rock crystal. It has a faint, enigmatic smile. It has a blue-striped divine wig, the Nemes headdress. But does it look like Pazer? Absolutely not. Pazer was 60 years old. He had a hook nose, a double chin, and probably a few missing teeth. This mask looks like a 20-year-old supermodel. This leads to a niche, psychological detail, the idealized self. Egyptian funerary art was not about realism, it was about potential. You didn't want to go to the afterlife looking like a tired old man. You wanted to arrive in your prime. The mask is a magical filter. By putting this mask on, you are telling the gods, this is the real me. Ignore the wrinkly body underneath. Look at the shiny gold face. It is the original profile picture versus real life. But there is a dark secret hidden inside the layers of this mask. You look at the back of the mask before you glue it down. You see writing, faint Greek or Demotic script on the papyrus scraps used to make the papier munchai. Is it a spell? A prayer? Number it looks like a tax receipt. This brings us to a massive academic controversy. The Mummy-S grocery list debate. In recent years, papyrologists have realized that the cartonnage used for mummy masks is a treasure trove of lost literature. To make the masks, embalmers often bought trash paper from the local recycling center. Camp the Destructionists argues that we should dissolve these masks to read the texts inside. They have found fragments of Sappho, early Gospels, and lost Homeric lines hiding inside the faces of mummies. They say the text is worth more than the mask. Camp B, the preservationists, is horrified. They argue that dissolving a 3,000-year-old work of art to read a grocery list or a fragment of a poem is vandalism. It is destroying one artifact to find another. You, the embalmer, have no idea that 3,000 years from now, scientists will be arguing about dissolving Pazer's face to read your old lunch receipt that you accidentally dropped in the glue bucket. You secure the mask with a few strips of linen around the neck. It is part of him now, but the head needs one more thing. It needs a heater. You lift the head gently. It is stiff and light. You slide a peculiar object underneath the back of the neck, right where a pillow would go. It is a disc made of stiffened linen or bronze, covered in strange drawings of four-headed rams and baboons. This is the hypocephalus, literally, under the head. Why does a mummy need a disc under his head? The text on the disc says, to kindle a flame under the head of the Osiris. The Egyptians were terrified of the dark and the cold. The afterlife is a shadowy place. This disc is a magical hot plate. It keeps the head warm. It keeps the vital spark of consciousness burning so Pazer doesn't forget who he is in the cold darkness of the tomb. It also connects him to the eye of Ra. The sun, it turns his head into a miniature sun that can rise again in the morning. You lower the head back down. Pazer is now fully equipped. He has his body reconstructed. He has his organs in jars, he has his amulets hidden, and he has his face, gold. He is ready for the final layer, the red shroud. You and Hori pick up a massive sheet of linen, dyed a deep, rusty red. This is the shroud of the saint. You drape it over the entire body, covering the geometric wrappings, covering the gold mask, covering the sandals. You pull it tight at the back, and sew it shut with a long bronze needle. Stitch, stitch, stitch. You are sewing him into a bag. Now he just looks like a red log. The gold face is hidden. The geometry is hidden. Why hide all that work? Because it is for the gods, not for the audience. The magic works better if it is contained. You take a strip of horizontal bandages and tie the shroud in place. One at the neck, one at the chest, one at the knees, one at the ankles. He looks like a package ready for shipping, and in a way he is. He is being shipped to the west, to the land of the dead. You step back, you wipe your hands on your kilt. The resin is starting to itch. You have finished the wrapping. The 70 days are almost up, but you can just hand this red bundle to the family and say, here you go. He needs a shell. He needs a house. He needs a coffin. But Pazer is rich. One coffin isn't enough. He needs a coffin inside a coffin inside a coffin, like a Russian doll of death. You look toward the carpentry workshop. The coffins have arrived. They are painted, varnished, and smell of fresh cedar. But there is a problem. The inner coffin looks tight, very tight, and Pazer, with all his layers of linen and resin, is now bulky. You are about to play a very high-stakes game of Tetris with a human body, and if he does fit, you can exactly ask him to suck in his gut. You are standing in the carpentry wing of the Pernefer, staring at what looks like a very expensive wooden puzzle. Before you are 3 coffins, each one slightly larger than the last, lined up like open clamshells. This is the Russian doll phase of the operation. Pazer, currently a heavy red-wrapped bundle of linen and resin, has to go into the first box. Then that box goes into the second box. Then that box goes into the third box. And finally, the whole assembly goes into a massive stone sarcophagus in the tomb. Why so many layers? This brings us to a mainstream historical fact. The womb of Nut. The coffin wasn't just a box, it was a universe. The interior of the lid is often painted with the image of Nut, the sky goddess. When you close the lid, Pazer is symbolically swallowed by the sky. He is returning to the womb of the goddess, so he can be reborn, just like the sun is swallowed by the sky at night and reborn at dawn. By using multiple coffins, you are creating multiple layers of magical protection. It is a spiritual firewall. But right now, you aren't thinking about theology. You are thinking about physics. You and Hori lift Pazer. He is heavy, maybe 150 pounds of dense linen and resin. You align him with the inner coffin. It is made of cedar, covered in gesso, plaster, and painted with gold leaf. It is shaped like a human, Anthropoid, complete with a painted face that matches the mask you just installed. Lower him, hoary grunts. You lower the mummy, scrape thud. He stops. He doesn't T-fit. You look at the shoulders. The geometric wrapping you did was too enthusiastic. You added too many layers. Pazer is now 2 inches wider than his box. Panic sets in. You can T-unwrap him. The resin is dry. You can T-build a new coffin. It takes months. So, you have to use force. This leads to a niche, grim reality, the percussive maintenance of the dead. Archaeologists have found mummies with broken collarbones, snapped ankles, or feet that were literally chopped off and tucked between the legs, all because the embalmers miscalculated the size of the box. You don't want to break Pazer. That would be rude, so you grab a pot of unguent, a slippery, scented fat. You grease the sides of the coffin, you grease the shoulders of the mummy. Push, Hori says. You push, you wedge him in, squelch. He slides into place. It is a tight fit, but he is in. But as you reach for the lid, you notice something about the hieroglyphs painted on the coffin. The paint looks fresh. Specifically, the paint where Pazer's name is written looks fresh. Underneath, you can see the faint outline of another name. This brings us to a massive academic controversy. The coffin recycling scandal in the New Kingdom, and especially the Third Intermediate Period, wood was scarce. Cedar had to be imported from Lebanon. It was expensive. So, what did people do? They stole coffins. Campa, the tomb robber theory, argues that people went into old tombs, dumped the old mummies out. Sorry, Grandma, scraped off the name, painted a new name on it, and resold it. Camp B, the state-sanctioned recycling, argues that it wasn't tea-robbery, it was government policy. When the economy collapsed, the priests themselves would empty old, forgotten warehouses and reissue coffins to new clients to keep the funeral industry running. So, is Pazer lying in a brand-new custom coffin? Or is he lying in a 200-year-old used car that has been repainted? You decide not to look too closely at the scratched-out name underneath. Pazer doesn't need to know he is the second tenant. You place the lid on the inner coffin. You drill holes and hammer in wooden dowels to lock it shut. Then, you lift this coffin and place it into the second coffin. This one fits easily. It was designed with a little more wiggle room. Finally, the whole assembly goes into the outer coffin. This one is massive. It is painted black with yellow varnish, the color of the sun god. It is covered in spells from the Book of the Dead. You seal the final lid. Pazer is gone. He is no longer a body. He is an object. He is a heavy rectangular block of wood and gold. He is ready for the procession. The doors of the Pernefer open. The sunlight streams in outside. You hear the wailing of the professional mourners. These are women hired to cry, tear their clothes, and throw dust on their heads. The louder they cry, the more important Pazer was. Judging by the noise, Pazer was a very big deal. You and the other embalmers hoist the heavy coffin onto your shoulders. It's time to leave the workshop. It's time to take Pazer to the river, cross to the west bank, the land of the dead, and drag him to his final address in the valley. You step out into the heat. Your work is technically done, but you have one last role to play. You have to watch the priest perform the magic that wakes him up. You are standing on the deck of a barge, watching the east bank of the Nile slowly recede. The water is green, sluggish, and teeming with life. Crocodiles, hippos, and fishermen, who are pretending not to notice the giant gold coffin sitting a few feet away from them. You are crossing the river. To us, this is just a commute. To the Egyptians, this is a cosmological event. The East Bank is the land of the living, where the sun rises. The West Bank is the land of the dead, where the sun sets. By crossing this stretch of water, you are physically trafficking Pazer from the world of biology to the world of geology. You are moving him from time to eternity. The barge bumps against the western shore. The air here feels different. It is drier. It smells of hot limestone and dust. This is the necropolis. The coffin is unloaded onto a sled. The Egyptians knew about the wheel. They had chariots, but for funerals, they preferred the sled. Why? Because wheels get stuck in the sand, and dragging is traditional. A team of oxen is hitched to the front. You and the other embalmers walk alongside, not as bearers, but as guardians. The noise is deafening. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact: the professional mourners. Surrounding the sled is a crowd of women wailing at the top of their lungs. They are tearing their clothes. They are rubbing dust and mud into their hair. Alas for you, you are going to the West. It sounds like pure, raw grief. But if you look closely, you see the head mourner signal with her hand. And they all stop to take a drink of water, then start again on cue. They are paid by the decibel. Pazer's family hired the best. A quiet funeral is a shameful funeral. The goal is to make enough noise to wake the gods and say, "Look who is coming, he was loved." But amidst the wailing women and the priests burning incense, your eye catches something strange being dragged on a separate, smaller sled behind the coffin. It looks like a shapeless, black blob. It is wrapped in an animal skin. It looks ominous. This is the Tikhenu. This leads to a massive, unsolved academic controversy. What is inside the bag? Egyptologists have been arguing about the Tikhenu for 100 years. We see it depicted in tomb paintings constantly, a dark amorphous bundle dragged alongside the mummy. Campa, the spare parts theory, argues that this bag contains everything that didn't fit in the jars or the mummy: the leftover blood, the rags used to wipe up the fluids, maybe even the brain slurry you threw out, symbolically. It is the biological waste that still belongs to the deceased and must be buried with him to keep him whole. Camp B, the shaman theory, argues that there is a person inside that skin, a priest wrapped in a bull's hide who goes into a trance state. He is acting out a rebirth ritual, simulating an embryo in a womb. Camp C, the human sacrifice echo, argues that in the very, very old days pre-dynastic, they used to sacrifice a servant to go with the king. The Tikhenu is a stylized, bloodless relic of that practice, a dummy, sacrificed so no one actually has to die. You look at the black bundle. It doesn't move. You hope it's just rags. If there is a priest sweating inside that skin in this heat, he is having a very bad day. The procession winds its way up into the desert cliffs. The sun is beating down. The oxen are groaning. Suddenly, the path is blocked by a group of men. They are wearing strange, tall crowns made of woven reeds. They are dancing. They are hopping on one foot, crossing their arms, and making aggressive gestures at the coffin. These are the Mu dancers. This is a niche, theatrical detail, the ferrymen of the soul. These dancers represent the ancestors. They are the border patrol of the afterlife. Their dance isn't a celebration. It's a challenge. They are physically acting out the barrier between the worlds. By dancing, they are greeting Pazer, but they are also testing him. They are the spiritual bouncers at the club entrance. Pazer's priests recite the correct spells. The dancers step aside. The checkpoint is cleared. Finally, you reach the tomb. It is a hole cut into the rock face. The entrance is marked with carved limestone jambs covered in prayers. The oxen stop. The wailing women reach a crescendo of screaming. The coffin is unhitched and stood upright. This is the moment. Right now, Pazer is just a box with a dead body inside. He is blind, deaf, and mute. He cannot eat the offerings. He cannot speak to Osiris. He needs to be activated. A priest steps forward. He is wearing a leopard skin robe, the uniform of the Sem priest. In his hand, he holds a strange tool. It looks like a carpenter. adze, a wood-cutting tool. But the blade is made of meteoritic iron or flint. It is shaped like the Big Dipper constellation. You watch from the side. You know what is coming. It is the opening of the mouth ceremony. It is the most important magic trick in the Egyptian playbook. Without this, all your work, the hook, the resin, the wrapping, the gold toe caps, is useless. If the priest drops the tool, Pazer stays dead forever. The priest raises the adze. He looks at the frozen golden face of the coffin. He is about to hack into the spiritual realm. You hold your breath. The Sem priest raises the adze, that strange crooked tool made of meteoritic iron. He steps closer to the upright coffin of Pazer. The gold face glitters in the sun, staring blindly at the horizon. The priest chants a spell that is older than the pyramids. I have opened your mouth. I have opened your two eyes. He touches the blade to the lips of the gold mask. Click then to the eyes. Click, click, click then to the nose. This brings us to a mainstream historical fact. The reanimation of the senses. To a modern observer, this looks like pantomime. To the Egyptians, this was metaphysical surgery. The mummy, despite all your hard work, was biologically dead. By touching the mask with the iron tool, the priest acts as a midwife. He is simulating the cutting of the umbilical cord. He is clearing the airways. Suddenly, in the eyes of the gods, Pazer can breathe again. He can speak. He can see the offerings. He can smell the incense. He is no longer a corpse, cat. He is an effective spirit, a Kate. You let out a breath. It worked. You didn't. Wrap him too tight. The magic got through. But the priest isn't done. He swaps the iron adze for a strange forked flint knife called a pesish, kef. It looks like a fishtail. This leads to a niche, symbolic detail, the cord of birth. This specific flint shape was used by midwives in the pre-dynastic era to cut the umbilical cord of newborn babies. By using it here, at the funeral, the Egyptians are making a profound statement. Death is just birth in reverse. Pazer is ending. He is being born into the West. The tomb is the womb. The sarcophagus is the cradle. It is a beautiful thought. It almost makes you forget that your feet are killing you, and you are covered in resin. Now comes the part you have been dreading. The magic is done. Now comes the manual labor. The coffin, heavy, slippery with gold leaf, and containing a man filled with linen and dried organs, must be moved into the tomb shaft. The tomb entrance is a square hole cut into the limestone floor of the cliff. It slopes down at a steep 45-degree angle into the darkness. You and the other embalmers grab the ropes. You loop them around the coffin. Ease it down, Hori shouts. If you drop him, you join him. You brace your feet against the sand. You lower the coffin inch by inch. The wood scrapes against the stone walls. Skirt. The air coming out of the tomb is cool and smells of stale dust and fresh paint. You reach the bottom. You are in the burial chamber. The walls are covered in paintings. Vivid blues, yellows, and reds. They depict Pazer farming in the field of reeds, eating bread, and hanging out with Osiris. In the center of the room sits the sarcophagus. This is the final shell, a massive box carved from red granite or limestone. It weighs tons. You lower the wooden coffin into the stone box. It fits. Thank the gods. Now the lid. You and 4 other men grab the heavy stone lid. You slide it over the opening. Grind, thud. The sound of stone hitting stone is final. It is the sound of a door closing that will not open again for 3,000 years. You step back. The room is silent. The torchlight flickers on the painted walls. Pazer is home. He has his organs in the jars in the corner. He has his Ushapti figures, little servant statues to do his work for him. He has baskets of bread and wine. He is set for eternity. But as you turn to leave, you pause. You look at the inscription carved over the doorframe. It is a warning. This brings us to a massive academic controversy. the curse of the pharaohs or lack thereof. We all know the Hollywood trope, death shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs the peace of the king. But did the Egyptians actually write curses? Camp of the Hollywood historians loves to cite the few tombs that do have threats. There are inscriptions that say things like, "As for any man who enters this tomb, I shall wring his neck like a goose," or "I shall seize him by the throat." Camp B, the realists, argues that these are incredibly rare. Most tombs have no curses. Why? Because writing a curse admits that the tomb can be robbed. It admits vulnerability. Instead, most inscriptions are positive. They are appeal to the living. They say, "O you who pass by this tomb, if you love life and hate death, say a prayer for me." They didn't want to kill you. They wanted you to read their name so they would stay alive in memory. So, are you cursed as you stand here? Probably not. But just in case, you whisper, "I did a good job, Pazer. Put in a good word for me with Anubis." You climb back up the shaft. The sunlight at the top is blinding. The masons are waiting. They push a massive stone block over the entrance. Then they mix mud plaster and seal the cracks. Then they sweep the sand over the spot. Within 10 minutes, the tomb is gone. There is just desert. The wailing women have stopped crying. They are drinking water and counting their pay. The family is holding a banquet near the entrance, a communion with the dead. They are eating roast duck and drinking beer, laughing, telling stories about Pazer. You are not invited. You are just the help. You look at your hands. They are stained black with resin. Your fingernails are rimmed with gold dust and natron. You smell like a mixture of cedar oil, sweat, and death. You are exhausted, but you feel a strange sense of satisfaction. You cheated nature. Nature wanted Pazer to rot. Nature wanted him to turn to dust and be forgotten. But you used salt, pine sap, and linen to stop the clock. You froze him in time. Because of you, he will last forever. You pick up your tools, the bronze hook, the obsidian knife, now dull, the empty resin pot. You start the long walk back to the river. The sun is setting now, turning the Nile into a ribbon of blood-red fire. The Nefer is closing for the night. You need a bath, a long, hot bath, and maybe a very large jar of beer. But as you walk, you realize that while Pazer is sleeping in his stone box, you are still awake. You are still in the land of the living, and that, you realize, is the best reward of all. You can feel the breeze. You can taste the dust. You can feel your own heart beating in your chest, without a scarab to weigh it down. The sun has finally dipped below the western horizon, plunging the desert into a sudden, deep blue twilight. The heat of the day evaporates almost instantly, replaced by a cool breeze drifting off the Nile. You are walking back toward the river, away from the cliffs, away from the tomb, away from Pazer. The wailing women have packed up and gone home to gargle salt water for their sore throats. The priests have returned to the temple to count their linen fees. It is just you and the silence. You look down at your hands again. In the moonlight, they look like they belong to a statue. The black resin has worked its way into every crease of your skin. The gold dust from the toe capping glitters faintly under your fingernails. You smell like a walking stick of incense. This brings us to a final, personal academic controversy. The social status of the embalmer. For centuries, historians relied on Herodotus, that Greek tourist again, who claimed that embalmers were social pariahs, untouchables who lived outside the city because they were unclean. He described people running away from the Parisgestes. The cutter, to avoid spiritual pollution. Camp A, the outcast theory, holds to this view. You are a necessary evil, like a butcher or a tanner. You deal with death, so life shuns you. Camp B, the priest theory, argues that Herodotus was wrong as usual. Egyptian records show that men like you often held high titles. You were controllers of the mysteries. You were allowed into the holiest places. You were a specialized class of priest. So, as you walk through the village, do people cross the street to avoid you, or do they bow? The truth is probably in the middle. They respect you. but they don't too necessarily want to hug you right now. You smell too much like the grave. You reach the bank of the Nile. You sit down on a stone steps leading into the water. It is time for the cleansing. You can go home to your wife and children looking like this. You grab a handful of wet sand. You grab a lump of natron soap. You start to scrub. 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 The resin is stubborn. It is waterproof. Remember, that was the whole point. It takes serious elbow grease to remove it from your own skin. You scrub until your skin is raw. You wash away the cedar oil, the myrrh, and the dust of the tomb. You watch the black streaks dissolve into the dark water of the Nile. The river takes it. The river takes everything. This leads to a mainstream historical fact, the cycle of the Nile. To the Egyptians, the river was the bloodstream of the god Osiris. Its annual flood brought the black silt Kemet that allowed life to grow in the desert. By washing in the river, you are reconnecting with life. You are washing off the static eternity of the mummy and re-entering the dynamic flow of the living. You dry off with a rough linen cloth. You put on a clean tunic. You feel human again. You walk back to your small mud brick house in the workman's village. The windows are glowing with the warm light of oil lamps. You smell something cooking, lentil soup, maybe grilled fish. It smells better than all the frankincense in the world. You sit down on your mat. Your family is asleep. You take a piece of bread. It is gritty. Egyptian bread was always full of sand from the grindstones. But it is soft. You take a sip of thick, sweet beer. You close your eyes. You think about Pazer. He is lying in the dark inside 3 coffins, inside a stone box, under a mountain. He has gold fingers. He has a gold face. He has magical amulets to protect his spine. He is perfect. He is imperishable. But he cannot taste this beer. He cannot feel the cool night air. He cannot scratch an itch. You realize the great irony of your profession. You spend your life working to grant others eternity. But the price of eternity is that you stop living. Pazer has become a god. But you are just a man with sore knees and resin under his fingernails. And right now, sitting in the quiet of your home, you wouldn't trade places with him for all the gold in his tomb. You look at your own left foot. You wiggle your big toe. It isn't wrapped in linen. It isn't capped in gold. It's just a toe. But it moves. It works. You smile. Walk well, Pazer. You whisper into the dark. Don't trip. The job is done. The cycle is complete. The sun has set on the dead, but it will rise again for you tomorrow. There will always be another client, another nose to hook, another flank to cut, another bandage to wrap, but that is a problem for tomorrow morning. Right now, the only thing you have to wrap is yourself in a blanket. The final wrap, and so the stone door has slid shut. The sand has been swept over the entrance, hiding the tomb from the eyes of the world. The desert wind has already begun to erase your footprints. You can stop working now. You don't have to hold your breath. You don't have to worry about the resin cooling too fast or the bandages unraveling. The tension of the 70 days has lifted off your shoulders like a heavy cloak. Imagine you are lying on a soft, cool bed of linen. The air around you is fresh and clean, smelling faintly of the river and the night-blooming lotus. The heavy, sweet scent of the embalming workshop is gone. You are safe. You are warm. You are whole. Your heart is beating a slow, steady rhythm in your chest, light as a feather, unburdened by judgment. Your mind is drifting, floating like a boat on the gentle current of the Nile. There are no more knots to tie. There are no more journeys to prepare for. You are exactly where you need to be. Let the darkness wrap you, not in tight bandages, but in a loose, comforting embrace. The stars are watching over you. Sirius, Orion, the Dipper. They are making their slow, eternal circle across the sky. Rest now, the work is finished. Sleep, the story ends here. Good night.